So, let me begin. My name is Adeel. I've just come in from London, where I live this year, but I used to live in Qatar before, where I was working for the Doha Center for Interfaith Dialogue, and I'm finishing off my PhD at Cambridge. Welcome, and I hope you tolerate the next 20 minutes or so. Is this visible? This is visible? Okay. So, you'll see why I've called the presentation Time Without Resentment, because it's about a poem that was not shared with you in the package that you received. It's a poem that I'm just going to be presenting here. It's the third poem which I'm going to be presenting here from the third poet, Amjad. But you'll see why resentment is a very important theme in this paper. And let me begin. So our constant companions through this presentation will be Marcel Mauss and Edmund Leach. And they're important figures for anthropologists, and British anthropology especially, and European anthropology. But I have been thinking with the notion of the gift, of Marcel Mauss's gift, and Edmund Leach's approach to rethink anthropology is a constant backdrop to this paper. But they'll figure here and there, and I'll point out where they are visible and where I'm thinking along with them, and sometimes thinking against them. So Derrida, who was mentioned earlier as well, wrote The Gift of Death and The Gift of Time, his two major works on the gift, and his reflections on Marcel Mauss's tradition of the gift, which have been translated as given time. So that's often misunderstood in English, because it's more about given that time is, sort of given the fact of time, or given the fact of death. So these are the universal for Derrida, I think, and so for Leach, with his reflections on rethinking anthropology, a project still close to my heart. We are in the 60s here mostly, and with the poems as well. We are in the 60s, and 61, 62 is somehow the era which my poems come from, as well as the writings that I reflect on, the poems come from as well. And we'll remain more or less in that period. Edmund Leach, while analyzing ritual time, that is sacred time, suggests that sacred time is played in reverse, while death is converted to birth in his 61 Rethinking Anthropology. Profane time, or ordinary time, is assumed to be forward-moving. So for both Derrida and Leach, taken for granted the obvious thing that ordinary time, is forward-moving. And any reflections on, sort of people doing otherwise is a reflection for anthropology or philosophy to question that, but the standard is time is forward-moving. And we'll move with that assumption. This conference reflects, of course, about the apocalypse. That is, I will take as the end of time. Time is not taken for granted by the subjects who we work with. It is not taken as a given. The forward movement of time is not taken as a given, for this conference at least. The time of humanity, as well as life on this planet, as well as the universe as a whole, is considered by each of our subjects, perhaps in different ways, to come to a radical halt, a cataclysmic end, a rapture that would change things for good and for all the remaining time of eternity, if there is any remaining eternity. My paper is concerned with three poets, three Muslim thinkers, reflecting on the theme of the apocalypse in the 20th century. They are Iqbal, Amjad, and Faiz. So Iqbal is the poet-philosopher of Muslim nationalism. He pretty much creates Muslim nationalism in the 20th century through his works, through his activism, and which culminates into the creation of Pakistan. His Persian works are read by Khomeini and by Ali Shariati. So he has a huge influence over the Abdu Afghani. So he has a huge influence over the 20th century period, and he was a Cambridge person as well, and his poem about time was written in Cambridge in 1907. Faiz, the Pakistani communist revolutionary, who pioneered setting up the communist movements in the Muslim world in the 60s and the 70s. He was the go-between between Moscow and the Muslim world. So again, a very important, crucial figure for the left wing of the Muslim world and the Middle East. He still resonates with the people in India and Pakistan, because even recently Imran Khan, if you would have known about, is an active politician now. He has got a third of the vote in Pakistan in the last elections. He might become prime minister next election. His party song is the song that I sent you, We Will See. So it still resonates on the streets in Pakistan. So this is just an evidence that poetry and what was considered courtly culture poetry, which is what this tradition is about. It is courtly culture from where this originates from, is because transformed now into something completely different in the 20th century. From the courts to newspapers in the nationalist movements to now on the streets. And this is a way where art, politics, culture are accessed together in a form where people, it becomes a leveler in a democratic culture, where the same words can enter and be made to resonate with an elite or an ordinary person. And that's a kind of a leveler which poetry is, and has a particular resonance in the Muslim world, in Turkey, from Turkey, Persia to India and to the Middle East as well, and less so in India, but at least in Pakistan. And that whole region is, if one wants to understand how the relationship between art and culture and politics, poetry is central. And that's why poetry has been chosen for this paper as well. Amjad is the third exception. He is more of an aloof poet. He is the Baudelaire of Urdu poetry. He is the modernist Urdu poet of the 20th century. He is the inspiration behind the title of this poem, of this paper. I have to hurry up. Time and the supreme names of God in Islam are feminine. And this is the argument that I'm trying to make here, that the gender of time and the gender of the apocalypse in that sense are also related. It's just not about the movements, but it's also about the conceptualization of what time is, what is the nature of time itself. And that is the angle that I'm taking in relation to these poems and looking at these poems. Okay. I don't think I'll be able to do this paper very quickly, but I'll try. So just to give you an example of how the process behind translating these poems and my exaggerated translations sometimes. So this is an extreme example of a French poem about which Derrida uses to explain the notion of the gift of time. Que désirez-vous donner, c'est le geste qui compte. So it's just not literal transliteration which matters in poetic translation, but what I'm trying to show here is that it is the exaggeration which is the poetic license that one has, but this is not what I've done in the poems. I guarantee that I have tried to stick as closely as possible to the original poems themselves. So Leach is interesting to begin with, because Leach talks about the reverse movement of time in his Rethinking Anthropology book. Formality, masquerade, and role reversal. So formality is sacralization period of sacred time in ritual, from profane time, and the role reversal is a reversal of gendered or social roles, which brings on the reversing of time itself in that ritual situation. It is encouraged to bring on a reversal of time, and I should be corrected here by my senior colleagues here who probably knew Leach as well rather than my having just read him. And then the masquerade stage is about desacralization period of sacred time, hence time allowed to move on or become profane again as roles become profane as well, and hence the rebirth of the individual after formalized ascent to a higher state, after death of the social individual's identity. So there's a relationship between ritual reversing social roles, reversal of time, and hence a ritual which is about rebirths, right? So this is sort of deep into ritual theory, which if I just stick with the formal period for now, so Sabah Mahmood, who's worked with Muslim movements in the Middle East, uses the formal period of the ritual stage, if you will, and she suggests that even in the formal period there is an important concept of agency, which is there, which relates to the argument which was made earlier, that even in the understanding of, she has reevaluated as birthing agency through rehearsed spontaneity and hence birthing the individual without any reversal of time involved. So in the performance of salat itself, in the performance of prayer, there is a spontaneity which is, even though if it's formalized and rehearsed, but there's a spontaneity which she considers as the moment of agency within a structure. And she's been challenging this view of agency, formal prayer, as not being just about structured, rehearsed behavior, but also about the possibility of spontaneity and agentive behavior. And I will, this resonates with a wider shift in thinking about agency in anthropology, especially through the gender of the gift, where agency is not just considered, agency or culture is not just considered the domain of a few, but everyone supposedly has it. My poets, however, like Fez, are still of the old school Marxist view of structure and agency. And if you want to understand this poem about, we will see the rule of creatures will begin, which is you, which is me. The Lord's name will remain hidden and present in all domain. Who is sight, who is seen, which is you, which is me. We are true, we are true. So in the we are true version, which is the Anal Haq, which is a reference from Hallaj, who was beheaded because he claimed that he was the truth in medieval Islam. This is a slogan which I said again is on the streets of Pakistan even today. This slogan I've translated as we are true because it resonates in a group, and it's more suitable, I think, to translate it into the English idiom as we are true, because this is the revolutionary slogan to be sung in harmonious chorus of the revolutionary avant-garde. It is the birth of agency in the revolutionary moment that Faiz is suggesting, and before that there is no agency. The proletariat does not have agency, and the apocalyptic theme is here used to bring in the notion of agency, the connection between the debates about agency in anthropology right now and the relationship to this poem. Iqbal's poem about time, which begins with the pregnant maternal time attached, that is attached to that which will be is our focus now. So what was is no more, what is will no more be. Time attends to it alone that will be. Time here is a she, so the notions used in Urdu are clearly about a mother's attachment to the becoming child. And that attachment in the womb is what Iqbal is I've tried to bring it into English. The time attends to it alone that will be through one's womb, right? So that is the notion that Iqbal uses, and it is clearly a view of time which is gendered and sort of a feminine view of time. Time is a mother, time is a she, unlike Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which will come out in May, where time is a he. So the notion of personified time, chronos from the ancient Greek tradition, to Lewis Carroll's view of time as a masculine figure, is different to the Islamic view of time, and especially the Sufi view of time, which is a Sufi is considered Ibn al-Waqt. So the children of the child of time, and hence this is what Iqbal resonates with as well. And but then the question is, what about death? And we emerge, in his view, we emerge as intoxicated movements pouring out of the ocean of being. Would it be fair to say that we die and are reverse birthed into our divine time mother, who is herself beyond time? Remember Leach and reverse movement here, right? So the reverse birthing is something which I have still to think about more. But here is what Adeel Kahn, who works on Iqbal and who works in contemporary anthropology, she has to say about Iqbal and Iqbal's theology, which is that there was both a durational quality to God and a transcendental aspect in which God was out of time. In this second aspect, time presented itself to God as a series of nows. Instead of seeing these articulations as a contradiction or its quick settlement in Iqbal's thinking, I propose that we see it as an instantiation of Iqbal's non-dialectical mode of thinking. So for Iqbal, I'll move on quickly to the theme of agency in Iqbal. He will keep the lantern alight, however strong tempests blow, that selfless man whose temperament the Lord has cast in gold. Here the notion of agency is very much Übermenschlichen, Nietzschean. Iqbal in his Javednama, which is the epic poem, which is an inspiration from Paradise Lost as well as a response to Dante's Divine Comedy, is a long Persian epic poem where he meets Nietzsche on the seventh heaven before the Garden of Paradise. And a Pakistani artist has made an image out of this movement as Iqbal in a bubble and Nietzsche there. Nietzsche focusing on the problems of humanity or being human, but unable to see that he is winged and that he is in a rope, and he is clearly unfocused. This whole piece in that epic poem is about Nietzsche not realizing that he's on the doorstep of the Garden of Paradise. And this is Iqbal introducing Nietzsche after in this last half of that epic poem where he's gone through 7 heavens. So after Saturn, the 7th heaven, before the Garden of Paradise, before the presence of God, appears Nietzsche. So the Nietzsche's importance for Iqbal is cannot be underestimated. And Nietzsche is where resentment comes in for me. Because for Nietzsche and for Deleuze, resentment, the man of resentment does not know how to and does not want to love, but wants to be loved. He wants to be loved, fed, watered, caressed. He is the impotent, the dyspeptic, the frigid, the insomniac, the slave, to which I would add perhaps the woman man. The resentment of Muslim women is not, or women everywhere is not something which can be reduced in importance. And resentment is the theme that I think connects Faiz, bring us back to Faiz, because Faiz in his poem says, see the marks on our skin, the branding of bad rage, to remain suffering with no respite in sight. And when mountains of oppression erupt in smoke, and beneath the feet of us common folk, the land will throb a deafening sound, and above the heads of tyrant folk, a lightning will strike, a thundering pound. So the resentment is crucial for the apocalyptic vision that Faiz has as the revolutionary rapture that the apocalypse is imagined for Faiz. And Faiz is clearly a dialectical thinker. He is thinking about a forward-moving time. But there is a caution that I would have in terms of any fictive model, where David Scott recently brings in Omens of Adversity, that any fictive model of time and in a post-revolutionary situation, we're suddenly more aware of how the collapse of emancipatory futures frames our imagining of what justice entails. And it is fictive models of time that shape our experience of the past and the present and our expectations of the future. And especially in ideological movements such as where Faiz was involved in, I think it's important to remind ourselves that there's something to think about the kind of fictive views of times, which, whether he believes or not, are something that he's trying to sell to a public. I will have to finish off, unfortunately, but I will quickly make the point that Richard Aldington, who died in '62, wrote Resentment as well, and his poem is what I will end with. Majid Amjad translates Aldington's poem, and this is where I get inspired to write this paper, and I will quickly go through it and end there. Time has no walls, it has many devotees, spinning and revolving around, dancing to make their peace. Words uttered, future to be, eras past, periods seen, today's despair, tomorrow's fair, all enveloped in its wave. Yesterday everything was that is today, today whatever is was there yesterday. When all that was meant to be became, being, becoming, being, what a game. Millions of millennia, neither day nor year, all but a long moment, what a mysterious fair. Colored equally by it, laughing lovers, miserable hearts, bed of roses, crushed flowers. Time a flowing stream, not a dagger's blade. Time real striving, not a killer having his way. The ignorant are blind to the riddles of time, blinded to its many faces, many chapters, due to the enchanting spells of matter. And here, time is clearly being compared to space and matter. And the question I, of course, have is that, okay, thank you. The question I, of course, have is that what I've tried to demonstrate here is that philosophy, poetry, and religion are at work here to dispel the spell of the concrete, as has been at the heart of the project of the '60s in the Richard Aldington's poem that I translated. And I've demonstrated this through this, I've tried to demonstrate this through this paper as well, that it is, that unlike what Lévi-Strauss in his the Savage Mind was considered a philosophy pursued by means of a poetry of the concrete, here is a set of thinkers who are thinking about a poetry, who are trying to dispel the spell of the concrete on our imaginations, on our collective imaginations, through poetry and through thoughtful poetry. And this is something to consider, and I will end there. There was some views of the apocalyptic end of the revenge of time, which while Halak, a painter who is also an Islamic theologian, he paints this images, the apocalyptic images of the revenge of time with the ecological apocalypse which is upon us, he's depicting. And I will, all I have to say there is that a time without resentment is something I look forward to. I do not know how that is possible for humanity to have a time without resentment, but here's something which one can perhaps end with in a reasonable way. With James Joyce, from inexistence to existence he came to many and was as one received. Existence with existence he was with any, as any with any. From existence to non-existence gone he would be, by all as none perceived. As none perceived. Thank you. Thank you, dear. So if there are any comments or any suggestions, I would be welcoming them on the email, as well as any questions that you might have related to what I've said or what I've not said, not had the opportunity to say.
But I appreciate you saying that time is feminine, but I wanted in the poem, in the poems you were looking at, is there any kind of religious warrant for going beyond that to talking about birthing and things like that in relation to future time? I mean, does that come from a much longer tradition, or is that...
There is a whole literature on the apocalyptic sayings of the Prophet, which are more or less on the apocryphal side of the tradition. And I don't work with that. Unfortunately, I work with the very, very popular.
Yeah.
That is there. It is there of interest to some people in the Middle East these days, with making documentaries about the end of time emerging, and even in Pakistan, there's some. Lebanon and Pakistan are two places where you'll find documentaries made about relations with the Hadith literature, with the current themes.
I just wondered if there was a gendered element to that kind of tradition that was...
The people who work with, for example, with women's movements, my colleagues like Sabah Mahmood and Adeel Kahn, they don't bring in, and I've made some inquiries on my account as well with movements that I know of in Pakistan, and I was asking them, you know, sort of, what about these times? Look at you, you're organized, self-organizing, isn't this wonderful? No, they do not want to have a clearly conscious awareness that this is anything atypical of the last millennia or the last 1500 years of Islamic history. While sociologically it is clearly evident that there's something happening in the Middle East, in the Muslim world. There's a sociological phenomena of women movements arising everywhere and organizing, but it's not being allowed by themselves to be made aware of as under the label of women/change. Women equals change view. They're not allowing it themselves. And I was asking some of the senior people in the movement, why not? And they were like, this is not our work. This is not our way of doing things. Which might suggest that means, this is why perhaps Sabah Mahmood and Adeel Kahn are suggesting that feminism is there. You just have to find it in the patriarchal structures. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But I work on Muslim feminism myself theoretically, because practically it's just very difficult to pinpoint, you know, them to say something like that, you know, to actually claim that they're actually part of a change, part of a sociological change.
Even though they're I do apologise, I forgot the wrong stick, but you seem to imply there were some resources within the understanding of time and things like that are gendered, that could be perhaps more explicitly used by those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, but that's to do with Muslim theology, and that's a debate which has been taking place historically. And Iqbal, of course, puts his position in relation to that debate on the Sufi side, which emphasize the feminine aspects of God in relation to the orthodox side. But yeah.
We have time for a very quick question. Anybody? No?
Really? Oh. Great.
There'll be more time.
There'll be more time later. Action X and coffee time right now.
All right. Thank you. Thanks very much.